With the voice of all things returning to the story in the conversations between Emet and Luffy and Emet and Joy Boy in chapter 1122, we wanted to take a moment to discuss the mystery behind the voice of all things, who in the story has used it, and how this ability could potentially contribute to the final saga of One Piece.
The voice of all things, for as long as we've known about it, is still one of the most insanely rare ability that allows users to not only converse with other very unique, gifted individuals, but also some legendary animals, and even in some cases objects such as poneglyphs within their mind. It's very much comparable to telepathy in a way, but it's more just, it seems, the ability to perceive the intention and message of everything around you, animal, object, or person.
It can, in a way, even be described as the power to hear and speak to the voice within a being's heart, understanding their true inner thoughts and emotions.
And in most instances, whenever somebody with the ability comes in close proximity to an animal that can use the voice, they will also, as we saw with Zunisha and Luffy and Momo, on the back of Zo, there's this loud, unintelligible noise, almost kind of like radio interference whenever you get, or when you get speaker interference, that it's too many of those things going off near each other at once. However, even in that same situation, those who do not have the voice of all things are unable to hear it at all, and it doesn't affect them even in the slightest.
Yeah, and it is pretty unclear exactly what determines the ability within users, but we have seen other similarities throughout the story. First, with Shirahoshi and Poseidon's ability to communicate specifically with the Sea Kings, but then it's also comparable to the connection that the Gorosei seem to have with one another, although this is more unclear, at least to this point, whether it's application of the voice or a separate ability altogether more tied to their yokai demon forms.
I know you specifically pointed out that the speech bubbles that they have when the Gorosei are speaking with one another is the same one that you see with the voice of all things, so it very easily could be another application of that. But like you said, we don't know enough about it, and something else that we did see is that there are other characters outside of the ones that can hear it that seem like they demonstrate an ability to at least connect with certain objects. Like when Zoro was in Alabasta and he was finally learning how to cut through steel for the first time, he was able to hear the voice of the palm next to him and the stones of the rubble. And it's possible that was another application of the voice of all things from somebody that doesn't even really hear the voice of everything else around them.
And even the people who have the ability can have varying degrees of proficiency using the ability, using the voice. The only race with the innate ability to use a voice is the Three-Eyed Tribe, who, along with being a very rare race to begin with themselves, also still have to work to awaken the ability and use it properly.
This is the case with Charlotte Pudding, who currently is being held captive by the Blackbeard Pirates after, essentially being held captive by her own mother the same way, despite not having awakened this ability just because of how powerful an ability it is to decipher the poneglyphs without even having to read them.
And that was the thing even when she was with Big Mom, like you were saying, where she was getting tired of waiting for Pudding to show the power.
And because of that, now somebody else might have the opportunity, but in terms of somebody who is a lot more in touch with their abilities with the voice of all things, you probably want to look at the most notable example being Gol D Roger, who was able to not only locate the poneglyphs by listening to the voice to guide him, kind of similar to how Nolan also heard the bell in Shandora. Maybe he also had the voice of all things. Everybody loves Nolan. You gotta give him a shout out when you can.
And that would make sense. He was a great adventurer and really had a lot of impressive feat and power, so it would be within reason that he could have this as well. We just don't have the verifiable proof.
Absolutely, and because of that, like we said, he was able to find the poneglyph, and it spoke to him in a way that he left his own inscription on it, making Robin believe that he had fully understood what happened, or that he had the ability to decipher the poneglyphs when he was just able to hear it. but that also led him to be able to steal Big Bomb's poneglyph. It's not as though, like I said, he can read them whatsoever, but it's more so that he has the ability to speak with them, and like we had said before, he understands the importance of their message just by hearing and listening to them. And it's almost as if Rayleigh understood this too by having Roger explain it. When he relayed to Robin, no, he couldn't read those, he just understood them.
Yeah, and he's also displayed the ability to hear the Sea Kings and sense Zunisha's presence while they were on Zoe. Although in neither of these cases, he wasn't able to actually decipher what exactly he was hearing or feeling, but again, he could at least feel the presence of greater beings. And I do believe at one point, there were Sea Kings even discussing with themselves the strength of his voice.
I can't remember that off the top of my head, but I would make sense. In that scene that you're describing, where Odin and the Roger pirates are all heading down to Fishman Island, they're talking initially about the next birth of the new king and Poseidon, but they do notice that he senses them, so I have to check back on the manga, but it's definitely possible. But that does lead us into talking about another user of the voice of all things, being Kozuki Odin, who, like I said, was also able to sense the voice of the Sea Kings, but he was also able to sense Zunisha, and similarly, he wasn't able to converse with the elephant, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and what really makes that even more interesting is the fact that Momonosuke later could, being able to have a direct conversation with, and even kind of command Zunisha to help them fight against the Beast Pirates in the raid of Onigashima.
Yeah, his own son having almost a greater potency of this power than his father, somebody who is their own renowned legend, but with the poneglyphs being created by their ancestors in the Kozuki family, it's interesting to consider whether or not the poneglyphs themselves have some kind of imbued voice of all things tied into them, or if it's just because of their proximity to the group that helped develop and create these things of great importance.
And along the same lines, I'm really interested to see whether Momo is able to actually enhance his abilities further as he becomes a stronger shogun of Wano.
He was challenged by Luffy, so he has to live up to the legacy to be a great shogun. And speaking of Luffy, he, of course, is our MC and was kind of our conduit into the idea of the voice of all things for the first time. But he, of course, also has demonstrated a great ability to be in touch with the voice of all things. He understands the Sea Kings. He didn't fully understand Zunisha at first, but I think a part of him did know that it was similar to what he had experienced before when he told Momo, you have to talk to it. He wants to talk to you.
And while he hasn't demonstrated the ability to sense the poneglyphs like Roger could, with his voice he was able to understand and converse with one of the biggest revelations of Egghead, Emet the Iron Giant, which ultimately led Emet to identify him as the person who Joy Boy would want him to protect using that special knot.
It's especially interesting to see what Luffy's going to be more in touch with this in the future, because, I mean, we've seen him grow his haki, his Conqueror's haki. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility if he's truly going to be the one to inherit all of this, that he would hone his voice of all things a bit more as well. And maybe there's going to be somebody in Elbaf that also could teach him a bit more about this.
That would be really cool. And then at the end of the last chapter, we also got to see that Joy Boy himself could use the ability to speak with Emet, which isn't really surprising considering just the amount of power we already assumed that he had, but it did give us our first real glimpse at the mysterious champion of the Void Century and really just doubled down on the fact that he was a truly special individual.
Especially after seeing the potency of his haki, there's no way this guy did not have the voice of all things at all. But just to give you a brief recap of everything we've covered so far, the only living users of the voice of all things that we still know in the story are Luffy, Momo, Zunisha, and potentially Pudding if she manages to awaken her ability. But that also includes the Sea Kings and, in some way, the poneglyphs. But those past users, including Joy Boy, Roger, Kozuki Odin, and now, with a very heavy heart, we'll probably have to add Emet to that list.
R.I.P. But with how rare the ability is, and the importance of every character that possesses it, it seems very likely that the voice of all things will have a key role in locating the One Piece. But in just what way that will be still seems very much a mystery, as we still don't really know where it comes from. So with this in mind, we wanted to propose a potential explanation for the voice of all things.
And that would be that the voice of all things could be in a sort of way based on the fragments of Joy Boy or of his lineage that allows for open communication with everything in the world that has a message to share. All the ancient animals and sea creatures. And I mean, we even saw Joy Boy in this chapter described, he'll be saving him all the way from the past. So maybe that's in a similar vein, saying this is all just descended from what he managed to break up in his own time.
And furthermore, with Roger and Luffy both being members of the D Clan, even having the potential to be distant, relatives of Joy Boy, this would explain why they possess this gift, while not every D Clan member does, while the Kozuki clan members do, as the ones who created the poneglyphs.
And an explanation of the voice could also be buried deep within those ancient texts of Ohara that could tie to a greater existence of the ancient kingdom and of their advanced abilities. Perhaps they were the ones in some way that developed this sort of telepathic communication network, but now it's been so fractured and divided that it's only certain users that have such a strong connection to the ancient kingdom that can use it still.
I'm just really excited to find out what it is. I mean, I don't think it was introduced until 500 chapters into the story, and it only pops up very rarely in very big moments. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays a part in the final saga.
I couldn't agree more, but you guys let us know in the comments below what you think of the voice of all things and what it will mean to the story. How do you think it's going to come into play in the final saga, and what else might we learn about it? Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed our discussion, subscribe for more One Piece theories and breakdowns in the future, and most importantly, don't forget, be crew!